I'm Kevin. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Cybersecurity Kept Simple 24/7 365. I've been part of the cyber version of cat and mouse between attackers and defenders for the last 20 years or so, as I've helped organizations defend and improve their perimeter security postures. According to Fortinet, a major player in firewall and security appliances, just over 40% of all cyber breaches are directly due to poor security practices in the perimeter. On the internet, there is nowhere to hide, and a new device will be known about within minutes, if not seconds. I once lit up a new firewall for a high-profile customer, and we counted 17 different addresses trying to connect to it within the first second of go live. Security researchers, commercial scanners, and academics are just some of the entities that are continuously scanning every single subnet, reporting what services, versions, vulnerabilities, and so on are applicable to each device on that subnet. Of course, cybercriminals utilize the same tools and available services to find out the same information. They will always be on the lookout for ways to monetize vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, or other weaknesses in a platform or technology. The perimeter that matters most is the boundary between our devices and the internet. As a rule, anything on the internet side of that boundary should be treated as hostile. The internal side is generally less hostile, but it's never risk-free. Remote access malware like rats succeed partially because organizations focus heavily on blocking inbound threats, yet pay far less attention to what's allowed to leave. Weak outbound controls give malware the freedom to spread and communicate with command and control servers. Even perimeters that should be impenetrable can still be compromised. The technically outstanding, state-sponsored Stuxnet worm breached the air-gap perimeter of a highly secure facility and destroyed around 1,000 nuclear centrifuges. Stuxnet remains one of the clearest examples of how advanced state actors can bypass even the strongest defenses to deliver their payloads. In this case, someone, likely an engineer or contractor, plugged an infected USB drive into a machine on the secure network. Unlike most successful cyber attacks, Stuxnet exploited the weakest link in the chain, a human. That single action bypassed the air gap and gave the worm a path straight through the perimeter. Raymond is a white-hat hacker with a hatred of cybercriminals. He reckons they give hackers like him a bad name. One day, whilst in the middle of another job, he stumbled across something that caught his eye. When he was inspecting the configuration of a perimeter router, he noticed something that stuck out like a sore thumb. Rather than just the 2 valid administration accounts he was aware of, this device had 14 full administrative accounts, far more than any device should have. He had a look at the logs and was stunned at what he saw. Repeated successful logins from multiple IP addresses using multiple administrative accounts. Dozens of successful logins from external IP addresses using SSH, Telnet, and Web UI. In addition to the multiple logins, the logs indicate continued attempts to access the underlying shell of the router operating system. As he ran the connected IP addresses through a database, one IP address in particular stuck out in the logs. Looking a bit deeper, he discovered that although the IP was relatively clean in terms of reported offenses, the 20 times or so that had been reported were for trying to access vulnerable Cisco routers via Web UI. He is aware of recent critical vulnerabilities with this feature and believes there is a good chance that this is the system that performed the initial breach. Looking closer at the configuration, he sees there are no access lists applied anywhere in the router and that the monitoring protocol, SNMP, is permitted. Incredibly, any external party with the SNMP community string can make a read-only session to this device. Exposing services on perimeter devices like this is madness. At the very minimum, if this provider has to monitor the device over the internet, an access list should be applied so that only they can connect to it. The device is actively being monitored by an external company located in another region. This will come in handy for notification. It doesn't take too long before he realizes why there's so much interest in the border router. He has found himself on some sort of financial extranet and at least 4 financial institutions and a telco are directly reachable from the compromised router. I've been fortunate enough to have worked with a few financial organizations, and none of them would have tolerated this level of risk. Financial institution switches directly attached to a perimeter router with no firewalls between them. That's a risky game for any organization, especially when that perimeter router is compromised. After a closer analysis of the configuration, connected sessions and logs, and comparing the IP addresses connecting to the device, he came up with a plan. First thing is to change the name of the router. This will trigger an SNMP alert to the external company monitoring the device. Raymond's change will be complete by the time anybody reads the alert, so he isn't worried about being cut off. Next up is to remove all of the fake administrative users. Apart from the number of privileged accounts, account names like vmadmin and root don't belong in this environment. As well as removing these accounts, he stops the vulnerable web UI services on the device. This will prevent the same vulnerability being exploited again. Besides, GUIs are for pussies. The command line's where it's at. You can see the moment the access list is applied by the drops. Every drop is a malicious actor that no longer has access to whatever they were up to. And this is one of those stories that has a happy ending. Raymond reported that within 12 hours, the provider replaced the router with a current model and version of software. They have left the web UI services disabled and kept his access list with a different name and additional internal entries. Looks like they removed his banner as well. Shame, I thought it was lovely. Apparently they never changed the local passwords. At its peak, the Hansa Dark marketplace was the third largest darknet market with a user base in the hundreds of thousands. In 2017, the Dutch high-tech crime unit breached the perimeter of Hansa to take full control of the marketplace. Rather than do an immediate takedown, they modified the codebase and covertly ran the market for 27 days. During this time, 38,000 transactions were logged and observed, allowing Dutch police to collect vital information such as vendor IP addresses and unencrypted shipping addresses. Once the marketplace was shut down by the authorities, law enforcement in half a dozen European countries confirmed arrests of vendors, including high-volume drug dealers and fraudulent document specialists. A report by cyber insurance firm Coalition shows the majority of ransomware claims involve a compromise of a perimeter device. Insecure VPNs and firewalls can serve as primary gateways to internal networks, and no manufacturer is immune from a failing or mistake in their code. Vulnerability exploitation in perimeter devices is accelerating, with state-sponsored actors weaponizing AI-driven tools to discover and exploit weaknesses. At the same time, malware is taking advantage of lax outbound policies on perimeter gateways to spread and communicate with command and control infrastructure. I hope you found this episode both entertaining and informative. Until next time, stay safe between the wires and don't be an easy victim for cybercriminals. Cheers!